Custom alarm tabs. Let's add some additional tab pages next to the 3 default tab pages that come out of the box. Okay, so first of all, I want to mention that any of the existing tab pages that you have in your window can be closed. You just select the tab page and there will be a close icon, so you can just close all of them. If you want to add a new tab page, you have the plus sign on the very right hand side. If you click on that plus sign, it adds a new tab page with the name New Tab, and it shows you this default welcome page, you could say. What do you want to do? Well, first of all, you might have this search for alarms readily available at the top. This is only available when you effectively have the DataMiner indexing enabled and installed on your DataMiner system. Basically, the Elastic cluster taking care of indexing of your alarms. So if we take a look at our DCP DMA and we click on the plus sign, we do not see that search. If we go for the demo.skyline.be, we click on the plus sign, we do have that search there. This search allows you to immediately, with a couple of keywords, search your entire history database. So if I'm looking for a server alarm, I can just type server, hit enter, and it will load all the alarms that contain server somewhere. So it's a little bit like a quick filter, but it's a quick filter on your history database. It does it by default in the last 24 hours, but you can change the time span you are currently looking at to one of the predefined items or a specific time range. So if you're looking for something in the name or something in the parameter, like a bitrate alarm that has happened over time in the last 24 hours, I can immediately see that as well. Even going into like a total processor load or something like that. So you can just start typing anything and it will immediately search for that specific keyword. So that's very convenient. Instead of downloading all the alarms from your history database, you can immediately start filtering on it from the start page. So that's the searching I can do on my alarm console. So searching into the history database. Next, underneath that search is a couple of different columns I have with how to add additional tab pages. The first one is actually reopening tab pages that I just closed before. So if you by mistake closed an alarm tab page, you can just quickly open up a new one again, and it will still be located in that reopen new tab or closed alarm lists there. Also note that there is a pin icon there. So you can actually pin some of those like frequently used or favorite alarm tab pages in there by clicking on the pin icon. So that allows you to, if you only once in a week or something need to look up something, you can pin it and it will always be available there. Doesn't matter how many tab pages you opened and closed in meantime, it will always be available. So that's quite handy to have like favorites or pinned items in there. Next, I want to take a look at the show current section. The show current section allows you to add a number of predefined tab pages. I will add some in a demo. And at the bottom, you can also apply filters or have a filtered tab page being added on your active alarms. Current alarms is about alarms that are happening now. Could be active alarms or masked or information events, but typically what is currently still active. That's in comparison with then, on the other hand, the show history and the alarms in a sliding window, which is more coming from the history database. So if we want to add a tab page that shows me only the critical active alarms, we will need to go to show current and apply a filter, which we will see in the next video. But there are some predefined ones. Let's play around with them in our system here. Let's go to our dcpdma.skyline.be. So I still have that new tab page. I have some tab pages that I closed before. I won't worry about those now. You can simply add your active alarms once more. We already have it, but if you close it by mistake, you can always go back and add it over there. But there is also an interesting one, active alarms linked to cards. Linked to cards. Well, it's actually linked to whatever card you have open. So if I open up a specific device or element, I will immediately see the active alarms, which is linked. It has an icon there that symbolizes the link, and it's linked to IRD01, so it shows me those alarms. If I open up this DMA info, another device or another element, it will immediately show me all the alarms that are active on this element. If I go to a specific view, or I go, for instance, to operations, a lot of alarms are in there, like 300, but if I go to Brussels, for instance, it will already reduce the number of alarms that I have in there because there are only a limited subset of elements inside Brussels. So that is quite a convenient tab page that I can open up. Remember that one definitely, the active alarms linked to cards. There is also a predefined one that filters on all the alarms that are active, that are assigned to you. Before I took ownership of an alarm, so it was, my name is still indicated there as the owner, it is acknowledged, so I conveniently have immediately a page with all my alarms. The opposite is then the unassigned active alarms. Those are not assigned to anybody. They are still open and assigned to the system. So I can pick the alarms from there, take ownership to move them to my alarms. So those are two tab pages which are related to the user acknowledgements. I can also add the information events. We already have the information events by default, so this one is also readily available, together with the masked alarms, which is also a default one, and suggestion events. Suggestion events is something that might be generated by the analytics. If they detect anomalies, things like that, you might have some popping up in there. Let me see if I have some suggestion events in this DataMiner system. So indeed, here we see a trend increase, a predicted critical high somewhere in the future. So prediction of alarms and anomalies can be detected by the AI. That's as suggestion events popping up in my DataMiner system. All right, so those are a couple of those current tab pages that we can easily add in your alarm lists. Now, next to the current ones, we also have the ones that are more focused towards the history. The first one is show history in a more classical way, you could say. It fetches the history in a specific time span. We have the possibility to quickly add the last hour, last 24 hours, last 7 days, or if you go for more, you can go for a custom time range. Before you do so, be aware that it will by default include the alarms, of course, but also the masked alarms. So if you don't want the masked alarms, you can disable that. And you can also potentially look at the information events or suggestion events. So let me play around with that. If I want to take a look which alarms that happened in the last hour, let me do it from the start. I click on the plus sign and I say show history of the last hour, and immediately it fetches all the alarms that occurred, that popped up in my system in the last hour. Note, of course, that some of those alarms could already be cleared again, could already be green again. But here you will actually see that some of the alarms are gray. That's because I mentioned before, the history tracking, it is not enabled by default on alarm history. If I would enable it, you would actually see that some of the alarms would you need to open it up to see the critical alarm. And you would have a lot of green alarms because everything happened in the past. So remember that if you, by default, this is disabled so that you can effectively see all the critical alarms and all the individual events that happened without the collapse on the life cycle. Now, if I want to see who was doing certain actions, I need to not look at the alarms, but I need to look at the information events. So once more, I add a tab page. Instead of immediately going to the last hour, I will change the configuration, and I won't be interested in alarms and masked alarms, but I want to see the information events of the last hour. And now it will fetch all the audit trailing and all the things that were happening, like people connecting to the DataMiner system, changing a certain setting. For instance, here on the IRD, I was playing around with the output gain on IRD01, so I changed it a couple of times. So all of these things are in the history database, and I can easily go back to yesterday as well. If I want to go back to yesterday, I need to not choose one of the predefined items, but I need to go to more, and there I can specify, let's go for a custom time range, like yesterday, and then I can specify, let's say between 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You can of course also use the date picker and show the alarms, and then it will basically go to that specific window in time, yesterday between 2 and 3 o'clock, which alarms were happening, or information events, depending on what you chose. So that's how you can easily add history. Remember, you can have some predefined windows or a more specific window in the more. Choose what you need to see, because by default it's alarms. Maybe you want to go for information events. If you want to have critical alarms of yesterday, you will need to go for the apply filters. Filters is something we will see in the next module. Okay, next to the history alarm, we also have what we call a sliding window. What is now the difference with history and sliding window? Well, history is a specific time slot on what happens, and the time slot doesn't change anymore. If I say last hour now, it's an hour ago until now, but if I wait 15 minutes, I move forward in time, but my time slot remains there in the past and goes further down in the past. With a sliding window, it actually is the last hour and moves along with us in time. So if I wait an hour, it actually moved an hour in the future, or with us in the future. So if I go for a last hour, and I don't go for a history last hour, but a sliding window last hour, those are now the alarms of the last hour, and slowly new alarms will be added on the top, and slowly old alarms will disappear at the bottom. So this moves along with us in time. If I wait an hour, it will still be the last hour, but then in the future. And that's also why the last hour of the history is indicated differently. This is the last hour because this is always applicable for a sliding window. This is one that says last hour up till whenever I loaded the alarm tab page. So therefore the time is indicated when this tab page was added in your UI. Now, next to the last hour and last 24 hours, you can also go for more for custom. We do have, of course, again, the possibility to choose alarms, masked alarms, information events, and there is one additional property that is available there, or option, that is keep active alarms. Keep active alarms. It basically means that even if the alarm is falling out of your last hour window, and if it is still active, it will keep it. Let's check that out, how that works. Because here I added, no, that was the history. I added last hour alarms, and it only shows me the last hour. Sorry. Last hour alarms, it only shows me the last hour until like 1 hour ago, which is, maybe I need to show the time in here as well. So that's about 1 hour ago. Okay, but if I now add again last hour, but I activate this option, it means that all the alarms that are still active, it will keep it in there as well. So let's add that last hour once more, what we will see is that we have again now more than 400 alarms because last hour is up to here. And then the older alarms are still in here, all the way down to the ones that happened years ago. It's basically the same thing as my active alarms. It goes all the way to years back, but so the bottom is basically the same between active alarms and the last hour with the keep active alarms enabled. But if I move to the top, what is the big difference? Here I only have active alarms. Here at the top, you will also see the green alarms, the ones that popped up for a second and disappeared again. All the green alarms, the normal alarms that are over for the last hour, are added in this tab page. So actually you could say that the sliding window with keep active alarms is a little bit the same as active alarms, but it adds an additional perspective there of all the normal green alarms of the last hour added to it, or the last 24 hours added to it. So that's also an interesting option you can activate. Of course, you can again apply the possibility to have filtering on there again, which we will see in the next video. Now, when we are adding some custom tab pages, you might add a number of them. So we had the last hour with the keep active. Let's add the last hour once more for a history perspective. And we already had an active alarms that we added here, and then a second one, active alarms. Okay, so that's perfect. I've added active alarms, and let me reorganize this. That was the history that was added here, the last hour, and the last hour with the keep. So let's call this active alarms with last hour normals, you could say. So let's call it like this. So I have a number of different tab pages I added, and I have also reorganized them, and I have also even changed the labels. What I wanted to show you is if I basically log out now, and if I log back in the next morning, you will basically see that the tab pages that are being remembered, that is indicated here in the slide as well, are the pages that are based on current alarms, like the active one, and sliding window tab pages. Those are remembered in your user setting. Again, of course, with the correct order and names that you defined on there. And the tab pages that are based on history alarms, like last hour I fetch until a certain time, doesn't move along with me in time, no sliding options there. A specific history consulting of alarms is never remembered in your user settings. The reason is that we consider this as a one-time consulting of the alarms, and we don't need to store that in your user settings, because tomorrow if I log in, I don't want to see the last hour anymore of yesterday somewhere in the afternoon. I don't really care about those anymore. And of course, with all your settings. So let's go back. So the active alarms is back in here. The last hour is in here. And the active alarms with last hour normals that I renamed is in there. But my history consultation of last hour is not being stored in your user settings. So that's how you can easily add custom tab pages to your alarm console. Remember, if you click on the plus sign and you have indexing, you do have the possibility to do a direct search onto your alarm database by just typing a couple of keywords and looking in the last 24 hours. Underneath that, you have the possibility to reopen closed tab pages to go for current tab pages, a couple of predefined ones. Remember the linked one to the cards, that's a convenient one. We do have the history fetching we can do, history of last hour or last 24 hours or something like that, or custom. You need to choose whether to include alarms or information events. And last item was the history sliding window we have. It moves along with us in time and you can even keep the active alarms in there. Then it's a little bit like an active alarm console with some remembering of the green alarms in the last hour, you could say. Okay, next one is then to effectively apply some filtering on there. See you at the next one.